All right, turning back to one of the top stories we're following today. Just hours after being sworn in on the force, a suburban Pittsburgh police officer shot and killed an unarmed African-American teenager as he ran away from officers. We warn you, it is very difficult and upsetting to watch this video. A witness caught the shooting on video and then uploaded it to Facebook. 17-year-old Antwon Rose died from his injuries at the hospital. Police maintain that Rose was riding in a car wanted in connection to a drive-by shooting. They have not released the name of the officer who fired the gun. Joining me now is criminal defense attorney Robert A. Bianchi. Thank you, attorney. Thank you so much for your time here. I think this is particularly upsetting when you see this kind of video, right? We're living in the Facebook video age, so there, more people are getting a chance to see it, and it gets sort of tried, for better or for worse, in the court of public opinion. But that's not how the law works. Tell me what your first impressions are after seeing the video yourself.
Well, as a prosecutor who was in charge of investigating all police agencies, 44 of them, with regard to excessive use of force, and having engaged in making the policy decisions as to whether cops and shooting fatalities would be prosecuted, I come from that background. And obviously what's disturbing is there's a case already, Tennessee versus Gardner, 1985, shooting a fleeing suspect for a felony is an improper use of force unless there is a significant risk of death or serious bodily injury to either the police officer or someone in the community. Now, we don't know all the facts yet, Michaela, but based on what we do know right now, this 17-year-old boy was unarmed. There is no indication that he had turned and posed or threatened a risk, although I will give the cops. They were in a very high-risk situation because that car and potentially the occupants were wanted for a shooting. So the conduct is escalating. And then when he flees, it escalates more. But cops are supposed to use temperamentally correct actions and not resort to lethal force unless their lives or others are in danger.
Okay, so we need to know, were their lives in danger? Were they temperamentally sound going into this? But I can imagine, we've been told by law enforcement, traffic stops are infinite, they pose a danger, right?
Yes.
There's a lot of unknowns. You've got vehicles which could be used as a weapon. You can't see necessarily the occupants. You don't know what is held inside. So there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered. They will bring us towards the truth.
Yeah, Michaela, you bring out a great point, and it is true. The cops are trained that the #1 way that they're not going to go home that night is in a motor vehicle-related incident. It's the highest risk. I've actually been there. As a lawyer litigating in court, it's one thing. But when you're actually there watching it happen and people are moving around, you don't know who they are. This is why it is imperative to tell the community. Not that maybe the officer was right or wrong. We don't have the facts yet. But when you are stopped by the police, you have to stop resisting. Don't flee. You're escalating and ratcheting up that tension cops automatically have when they're doing a high-risk stop like this. I'm not trying to place blame on the young man, but what I am saying is that many times you see this happening in the context of resisting arrest or flight. You have to teach your kids how to appropriately respond to police officers. But again, that doesn't mean the police officers can just resort to lethal force because somebody is fleeing.
Yeah, we hold our police officers to a higher standard than we do a 17-year-old kid. A 17-year-old kid, I mean, we don't know what was in the contents of his head and his heart. We don't know if he had an intention, if he was frightened. But you look at this kid, he's 17 years old. A decision he made ended up in him not going home. You talk about these officers not going home to their families. This kid isn't going home to his family. And there's a lot of families that are going to say, how do I make sure my teenager gets home from a night out with his friends?
Michaela, you were bringing up a great point because it's like a perfect storm that has been going on. The community doesn't trust the police in many instances, and the police is becoming more distrustful of the community. When I was prosecutor, the first thing I did was start a community affairs unit for the very purpose of partnering with the community that needed help with regard to crime interdiction. But moreover, when I had my first police shooting, I went to the scene and I told my chief, I called him on the phone, I said, you get those community leaders that we've built a relationship with in my office, because I don't want protests. I want to be able to competently do it. And they trusted me enough to complete a very thorough multi-month investigation. I invited them to the press conference when we finally concluded the case. I asked them to ask questions. They came out afterwards and said, we have never been involved in such a proactive manner like this. So the community relations in many places, Michaela, unfortunately, is looked at as a negative thing. It's a positive thing.
So, okay, so to that end, I'm going to ask one last question. I know that's almost not even fair to ask. Does the law get it right mostly? I mean, you know, we see these scenes happen. I talked to an attorney today that's representing Antwon's family, and I've talked to him. And since this show is about to have its second anniversary, and I've talked to this brother like three or four times now on the air about young black men being shot. So, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are saying, well, they're clearly doing something wrong. These black kids are doing something wrong. Why are they running around? And we don't know. We don't know in this situation. But when a family's looking for justice, to find out if there can be justice for their son or their daughter, we see them go. Police officers don't often get indicted. Generally, they get acquitted. So does that mean the law is getting it right and black folks are wrong? Like, where do you sit on this? Because it is confounding to so many of us.
Yeah, well, I won't speak in terms of generally black folks. I'll talk in terms of excessive force complaints. They are very hard to prosecute because the laws in most states give cops wide discretion with regard to the use of lethal force. It has to be reasonable, but that, you know, convincing 12 people beyond a reasonable doubt that a cop did something at the time that was unreasonable is difficult. And let's face it, juries tend to go along with cops, whether you're black, white, or indifferent. That's been my experience. But of course, there's other avenues of redress, which is civil rights complaints under 42 U.S.C. 1983, as well as internal affairs. I understand it's not a perfect solution.
No, you know, it isn't, and we've heard that from families that the civil lawsuit, you know, it doesn't feel the same. Money can't bring back their kid. Either can a prison sentence, you know what I mean? Like, it can't bring back their child or can't undo a wrong if a wrong was done. Again, we don't know. We got to find out what's going on with the story. We hope there's going to be transparency. We hope that there are going to be a lot of people asking the right questions. Robert Bianchi, thank you so much for your candid comments and for sitting here with me today. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Michaela. Thank you.